Yeah. Hi, I'm Mike Elliott. I'm the Chief Technical Officer for Mercedes. I've been with the company since 2012 in various roles, but only recently as the CTO.
So tell us how your current job is. Is it more focused on managing at the moment or designing CTO?
I guess the way to look at it is more of a strategic role. So it's longer term thinking. It's thinking about have we got the right people, the right technologies, have we got the right processes in place? So I think if you look at James's role, James Allison as the technical director, that's more the tactical role of working out what we're doing with the cars, and my role is the sort of the longer term thinking.
How has your job changed compared to the times when you started your F1 career?
Oh, crikey, that's a long time ago. So I started in 2000, originally as an aerodynamicist. I think at that stage, teams were quite a lot smaller. As an aerodynamicist, I had lots of opportunities. I spent 3 years trackside. I did some vehicle dynamics, as well as doing aero. So I think the business has changed an awful lot. The amount of detail, the amount of sort of I guess just detail is the right word. The amount we're sort of looking into all of the fine things about all those little differences that make the car a little bit quicker.
And what's the impact that cost cap has made on the efficiency, manufacturing, designing parts?
I guess when you look at engineering in general, engineering is a challenge of dealing with constraints, and the cost cap is just another constraint. And so what you're trying to do is to work out how do you gather as much performance as you possibly can within those constraints that you've got. And in terms of the cost cap, that's about how do you get as much as you possibly can with a given amount of money. So you're always trying to make things more efficient. You're trying to reuse as much as you can do. But the game of Formula One hasn't changed. It's still about trying to learn faster than your competitors and turn that learning into parts and ultimately into performance at the track.
But the rules have changed quite a lot. I mean, the way you try to achieve it. Now you have to be really smart on what you want to manufacture, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I think, when you go back to pre-cost cap, it wasn't like we were unconstrained. It wasn't like we had all the money in the world to spend. And so you always were making decisions that sort of, what's the right way to spend your resources to get the most out of it. I think the cost caps come along and that sort of focused your mind a bit more. And as a consequence of that, you are making more decisions about where you spend your money. You are looking for ways to try and save money in the processes that you're making. But it's not fundamental change from where we were before.
Is technical directive number 45 something that you feel was needed?
I think time will tell. TD45 was brought in to try and make it clear what you can and can't do within the world of non-F1. For us, we were always working to a process of, we're an F1 team, that's what we do. But we also had some other projects. We've always had other projects with the customer wind tunnel that we've had for years and years and years. We've done America's Cup prior to the cost cap, and we're still doing it through the cost cap. And I think all that TD45 has done is to try and make it clear to the teams what you can and can't do.
Back in the days, Gordon Murray would say that he designed the car by himself. How many people are involved in the process nowadays?
Well, lots. If you take both this site and at Brixworth, there's well over 1,000 people working on a racing car. I think even in my time, when I joined in 2000, when I started in Formula One, it was not about one person then, it was about teams of people working together. And I think more and more it's become about how do you get a group of people to work together in a way that they can bring as much of themselves into the project as they possibly can, but collectively they can produce the best car possible.
Can you walk us through whole process from the idea to something that we actually see on the circuit on a car?
Yeah, it's a good question, and in some ways that varies depending on what it is. But if we take, say, an aerodynamic component, we'll be gathering information all the time. We'll be looking at the regulations and saying, what can we do with those regulations? Where are there opportunities in them? Or if the regulations have prevented us doing something we used to do in the past, how can we achieve the same thing in the new regulations? So you're generating ideas, you're taking feedback from the car, you're taking feedback from the wind tunnel, feedback from what you've seen in computational fluid dynamics. so a wind tunnel in a computer, and trying to use all that information to come up with ideas of things that you might want to try and do. You generate that idea, probably take it into CFD first, test it there. If it's interesting, take it to the wind tunnel, and if at that point you think, oh, this is something we want to do, then that'll get fed into design. The components will be designed, they'll be checked in, finite elements to make sure they're stiff enough, and then we'll design, obviously having designed that part, we'll then push it through manufacturing, make those components, test those components in whatever way they need to be tested in the factory, take them to the track, and then see whether they deliver what we expect them to deliver with all the sensors we've got to measure them on the car. And then that feedback will then go back into the loop, and we'll go around the next iteration for the next set of bits that we want to bring.
So how many hours would you say you spend working on a car before you actually put it on the track?
I think it's a really difficult question to answer because it completely depends on which bit of the car we're talking about. You know, things like a gearbox, for instance, we'll be designing that, you know, at the moment they're frozen, but in the periods when they weren't frozen, maybe almost a year ahead of the car. Some of the aerodynamic components, some of the smaller aerodynamic components, you know, we could be developing this week and potentially be on the car at the weekend. That's not impossible depending on what it is. We probably see less of that sort of speed of turnaround now that the cost cap's in place, but you know, it's not abnormal to see something within a month go from wind tunnel to track.
The team is now in a completely different position compared to previous years.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, and what do you do internally to keep the motivation up to work as hard as you can to go back on top?
I think generally speaking, the people that work in this business are competitive. You know, they want to win, they want to push as hard as they can to win. And so you don't have to do a huge amount to motivate them. I think what you've got to do is to make sure that your culture and your behaviours are right, that people are working together, that, you know, there isn't any finger pointing, that everybody is trying to make their contribution to make the car go faster. And I think having that culture embedded within the company is the right place to start. So it's more about sort of making sure that our behaviours fit with that culture and we're doing the right things than actually trying to motivate people.
I remember this one quote, I'm not sure who said that, but it really, I thought it was really important that there are people in a factory who all they remember is winning. And since the beginning of last year, they're in a completely different position. I mean, it requires some mindset change.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you've been in Formula One for a long time, you know winning is not the normal. You know, it's unusual. In fact, it's never been done for anybody to win 8 championships in a row, which is what we managed to achieve. Yep. And yes, we've got a large number of people in the factory up until last year never knew anything but winning championships. But I think in any sport, teams have their high points and teams have their low points, and our job is to get through this phase we're in at the moment and try and get ourselves winning as fast as we can. And for those that have never been in a position of not winning, this is part of their journey, part of their learning, and hopefully they sort of take the hunger of what winning felt like and turn that into how do we make the next step, how do we get ourselves back to the front.
You've been here for quite a while, so I'm wondering what was the most difficult, getting on top the first time, trying to stay on top for many years, or the situation you're now in, trying to get back to the top?
I mean, I guess I've been in Formula One a long enough time to sort of know the various phases. I think when I joined the team in 2012, it was clear to me that we were moving in a good direction. And there's a positive energy to being behind and wanting to get to the front. I think when you're at the front and you fall off from that, it's not the same thing. There's a sort of, you know, there's not an expectation that you should win because we're not arrogant enough to think that way. But you've got so used to winning that it hurts, really hurts when you're not winning. And so, you know, there's this famous Kubler-Ross change curve that you go through of the various stages of disappointment. And you've just got to get yourself through that and look at how do we move ourselves forward? How do we get ourselves going again? But I guess in answering your question, I guess this is the most difficult phase, you know, accepting that you're not where you want to be and turning that round into what are the things that you're going to do to go and sort that out and get yourself back to the front.
I need to go back to the beginning of the new era. What did you see in data? What made you go for the zero side pod concept?
Um, I think, I mean, a lot has been made of the zero side pod concept. And I think the reality of how you develop a car, particularly aerodynamically, is you look at the regulations, you work out where the opportunities are in those, and you go and you test some ideas. You've got very limited runs. You know, as the team, the winning team at the time, we probably had 28 runs a week in the tunnel. That's all. So you've got to try some things that you believe in. You've got to try and take those concepts and move them forwards. And you can't try every different variant. You just don't have enough runs. So you've got to follow a theme, and what comes out of those runs and that learning turns into the next thing. And we've ended up where we've ended up, and others have ended up in a different place. And, you know, we're questioning that. And at various stages through the development, we've questioned that, and we've gone back and we've tried things, tried different concepts to see whether it'd move us in a different direction, but kept finding that where we were was the right solution for us. The fact that it's not the right solution for others suggests there's definitely another route to play, and you know, we've over time got more and more adventurous with the sort of opportunities that we're looking at, and the things that we're trying, because clearly there's a different space that you can work in, and that's where we're trying to get to.
Do you remember the moment when you finally realized that was a blind alley?
I'm not sure we ever did realise it was a blind alley. I think, you know, you're faced with this. If you imagine you've got this concept, you're testing it in the wind tunnel, you're trying components around it, ideas around it, and we're moving forward. You know, we're continually finding performance, and we're moving the car forward, and we saw that all the way through last year. The question you have to ask yourself is not, have you stopped, are you in a blind alley, but is there a different development or different concept that would give you a faster development rate? And normally what happens in aerodynamics, in order to change from what you've got to take a hit. You've got to take a big step backwards to then try and move forward again. And so you're gambling on, is that step back I'm going to make going to deliver more performance in the long run? And you actually never know the answer to that, because whatever you do, you never play the other set of cards. So if you imagine, you know, you choose to play this set of cards and you choose to develop in that direction. If you change your mind and develop in a different direction, you don't know how the original hand would have played out. There's no way of knowing. So they're all judgment calls, and it's a judgment about where you think you're going to find the most performance. But I think, you know, you have to have a healthy amount of respect. You have to look at what all your opposition are doing, look at the development slopes they're on, and ask yourself the question, you know, is it time to make a change or not?
And this season is really special. You never know going into the race who's your closest opponent gonna be. There are no two teams rivalry. It's yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously Max is having a stellar season out front, but I think when you compare, you know, Ferrari, Aston Martin, and us, it's been close, and now McLaren seem to have got in on that fight as well. You know, I guess the battle for second is a really interesting championship. Championship at the moment we're leading, and we need to outdevelop our competitors.
How much effort is already being put into the next year's car?
I think at this time of the year there's already a chunk of effort. You know, you're looking at the bigger bits that you want to do, whether that's chassis, gearboxes, suspension layouts, all that sort of stuff has to be done now. There just isn't enough time to leave that sort of bigger conceptual work in aerodynamics, and, you know, in some ways leads to those decisions in gearboxes and chassis you need to be doing at the moment. So that work is happening. The detailed aerodynamics can happen later. And I guess for us, we've got that balance of trying to understand what we've currently got and work out how we'd want to change it for next year, along with doing the sort of big development work for next year. We've got to just get that balance right. But in terms of our thinking, most of our thinking is in next year's car now.
How your job at the moment differs from your role as a technical director?
I guess, as I said before, really, it's more longer term. So I'm less involved in the day-to-day, what are we doing with the car, less involved with the race weekends than I was. I'll still attend some races this year. I'm more thinking about, you know, have we got the right people in the right places? Have we got the sort of the right plan to develop the people that we've got coming through? Where are we with our processes? Are there, you know, efficiencies we can make? Are there methodologies that we can improve? And then looking at sort of technologies and saying, you know, what's the future hold for us? What technologies should we be investing in? And, you know, I guess when you think about the cost cap, you think quite a lot about the car, but ultimately, you know, where you are as an organisation, how capable you are both in technology and in people, is probably really what drives the car performance, and so the cost cap is also influencing our decisions there, and that's a big part of my role.
Was it in fact your idea to make the swap with James?
So James and I were probably discussing over the winter about how it was going. You know, clearly we've had a long period of success. Taking over as technical director and it not quite going the way we wanted to go to was tough, and we discussed whether you know, we got this the right way round and was this working? And then, yeah, Toto and I had a conversation. It wasn't the easiest of conversations, and came to the conclusion we needed to make some changes. And we'd made changes elsewhere in the organisation as well, things that we thought we needed to do for the long term, that things I'd initiated. And I guess I initiated this conversation as well.
To what extent can you or should you listen to the drivers and their feelings about the car when you're in a difficult situation like it's been for last year?
That's again a really good question. I think, you know, of all the sensors we've got on the car, the driver's probably the best one. You know, they're the only ones that can tell you how the car feels to drive and what they feel is limiting them. I think, you know, there's always this sort of difficulty of translating what the driver feels to what's actually happening with the car. And, you know, who's best placed to make that decision? Is that the driver, or is that the engineer interpreting the driver? So we always listen to what the drivers have got to tell us, listen really carefully to what the drivers have got to tell us. But then it becomes a case of, you know, what's the best way to develop moving forward? How can we take their feedback, turn that into things that we want to action from an engineering sense? But also, you know, from the point of a cost cap, you know, what's going to give us the most bang for our buck? What's the best place to spend our resources to make the car go quicker? And they're judgment calls, and they generally lie with the technical team.
We've just visited the factory. You've got amazing tools here, but human input is still the most crucial part, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, everything is about people. Whatever company you're in, everything is about people. And we're lucky that we've got some fantastic people in this team, people that have contributed to winning 8 world championships, and people that are desperately trying to get back to winning ways now. And, you know, it doesn't matter what kit you've got to have the right people to not only operate that equipment, but also to dream up what's the next thing you need, what's the next sort of direction we're going to take, what's the next technology we want to invest in. And I think in that regard, we're really lucky.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right.